mighty thorough over there with the...
Are you the leader tonight?
I am, I guess, yeah.
Okay.
I just want to pull my packet. So I'd like to call the January 13th, 2020 Economic Development Commission meeting to order at 7:01 PM. Okay. All right. I'm sorry, I have to pull this up. So I guess roll call first.
Thank you, Commissioner Gansey, and thank you for chairing this meeting tonight. And Happy New Year to everybody as well. Thanks for coming out tonight to the first EDC meeting of the year. Roll call, Jerry Cabasco, absent. Kirsten Erickson.
Here.
Robert Perry.
Here.
Tracy Smadilla is, let me know she's not going to be here. Nan Gutenkopf. Joel Laporte.
Here.
Adam Lewinsky. Stephanie Gansey.
Here.
Michelle Hughes.
Here.
Okay, thank you. We do have a quorum tonight.
All right. Next on the agenda is approval of the minutes. Is there any discussion? And it looks like we need to update that Adam is coming in the door.
Oh, thank you. I'll get that down in the record. Commissioner Lewinsky is present.
Thank you. So back to approval of the minutes. Is there any discussion or comments with those? No. If not, can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I motion to approve the minutes.
Motion carried. Next on the agenda is public comment. Not seeing anyone in the audience unless there's anyone else that wants any public comment. All right. Then I guess we can move on to number 5, Annual Economic Indicators Report, which I think Tony is going to walk us through that report.
Thank you, Commissioner Gansey. And for quick background on this, for those of you who haven't had the pleasure of going through this economic indicators report before, is in the EDC, we spent quite a few months in 2015 devising a marketing plan. That was one of the strategic goals of the village board that year, and the EDC came up with a 2016 through 2020 marketing plan, which ultimately was adopted by the village board, I think early in 2016. For those of you who were on the commission at the time and the commissioners who came before you, we had some detailed discussions about the challenges the village was facing at the time economically and strategies to undertake to continue growing the economy and backfilling vacant spaces. So what we did was established a baseline. In other words, took a snapshot in time. This is actually the 5th such economic indicators report that I gathered all the information and am presenting to all of you. And it looks at some of the major economic indicators. A lot of times in the rest of the country, you hear different economic indicators report, like gross domestic product and the interest rates and unemployment rates and these numbers that the Fed releases occasionally. Well, this is the village's version of that, to just take a snapshot in time at the beginning of each year to see if we're making progress, if we're going backwards in some instances, or just kind of maintaining the current status on it. So as things would have it, looking at these statistics, I'm not going to walk through the 72 pages that some people pointed out are in the reports. I'm going to generalize them, but I do attach them, so you see that I use a lot of third-party sources. Some of them are open to anybody who goes on to the site, such as the census, and others are subscription-based, like ESRI, that the village subscribes to, and yet others, like Jobs EQ and CoStar, we obtain those reports through our membership with Choose DuPage. So Choose DuPage subscribes to those. CoStar itself is about $5,000 per month to subscribe to. And I want to do a kind of a shout out, they're not here, but Choose DuPage, of the 3 counties that the village is part of, they're the ones who actually subscribe to some of these services that help boost our economic development efforts. So I want to thank Choose DuPage. I could make this a super short report and just say the numbers are great. They're better than they have been. Both the commercial/retail as well as the industrial vacancy rates are at their lowest. Not only on the 5 years that I've been presenting this, but I think maybe in the 15 years that I've been with the village since '05. Of course, that's great news. I do want to point out that economics and real estate does, of course, go through cycles. There was a huge boom for quite a few years. Then there was a huge bust for a number of years. And then since about 2011 into 2012, these rates have been climbing again to their peak now, where we're only at a 6.6% vacancy rate in terms of commercial. I want to preface this all by saying in both the commercial, industrial, office, and all real estate types of professions, as well as the economic development field as well, we measure this by a square foot basis. So you could have a building that's, say, 100,000 square feet, and one space is 50,000 square feet, and that's empty. The other 50,000 square feet could be divided into 5 units, and you don't look at that building as being 5 out of 6 units filled. You look at a building like that as 50% filled. So this is purely on a square footage basis. I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna go through, can't possibly go through every slide, but want to hit the high notes and the low notes of this. So, as I mentioned, the highlight of it's probably the commercial vacancy rate, or another way of saying it is the high occupancy rate of about 93%. Last year it was 8.2%, which in itself is a healthy rate. 7.2% in the first quarter of 2018. So I'm gonna knock wood. It's been very solid, under 10% for the last 3 years, which is essentially one of the benchmarks that they look for in commercial real estate. I do want to mention, after there was a very large vacancy filled at the corner of Stearns and 59, that really reduced the vacancy rate. When I was sitting in this chair in 2017, I was telling you that the vacancy rate was 14%. And going back 4 years ago, February 16, it was 19%. That was kind of, just like I'm saying this is the lowest I've seen, that was really the highest I've seen in terms of the vacancy rate. We all know the big vacancies in the streets of Bartlett. The largest portion of the former Bartlett Fresh Market still remains available. That's about 22,000 square feet. But the good news is, a year ago, it was 32,000 square feet. So Arminetti is in there now, and Taco and Tequila Restaurant's going to be opening probably next month. So Mr. Rafidia, the buyer and redeveloper of that center, has been filling some spaces pretty nicely. I don't want to get too hung up on that particular metric, but it's an important one. Moving on, the population has remained fairly static. About 41,000 still, which is an S3 estimate, which is the same as the 2010 census. The good news is, of course, we're going to be doing a big push on the census this year. There's going to be a census later on in 2020. Joey is kind of our census go-to person here, and just asking him a few days ago, he said our numbers won't come out this year, but early next year. Anecdotally, I can tell you there's only been a few infill projects. There's been a few homes built on the west side of the town, Bartlett Point West. There's been a few people who've put up 4 houses here, 5 houses there. I don't anticipate the population growth to be too substantial when they finally give us the count next year. There is an asterisk next to that. I'm not really getting into it for this particular report, but we're working on several village-owned sites that could possibly attract apartment developments. And so there could be several hundred more units built within the next year or two, couple years, I should say. And if that's the case, you'll see these numbers reflected probably in the 2022 to 2023 economic indicators report. In terms of the median household income, that's another metric that many businesses look at. On a side note, Scott and I will be meeting with a couple potential businesses this week, and I can assure you both of them look very hard at median household income. And it's just about 100,000 even, 41,000 per capita. They measure that by all persons aged 15 years or older. One of the things I do want to hit on that is another big metric that I look at and a lot of businesses do, it's important. They call it daytime population. Now, Bartlett has always typically been known as a bedroom community. Before the business parks started building up and before some of these newer shopping centers were built, it was just known as a place with houses. We have relatively little land dedicated to commercial development in compared to a lot of communities. So one of the reasons behind building up these business parks, Brewster Creek and also Blue Heron, not just reusing the land and making use of it, which in itself is a huge benefit, but also to build up the daytime population. I can't quote you the exact number of what it was when I started here in 2005, but it was roughly half of what it is now. The daytime population number in terms of workers was low, 4,000 or 5,000 people. Flexonics was a larger employer back then, but we didn't have almost any employers in the business parks. And anyhow, that's a metric that we look at. We have a couple different reports I mentioned. One's called Jobs EQ that shows the highest number. I tend to use the US Census numbers, but unfortunately it's always a couple years behind in terms of their measurements. And I just want to point out that we have an estimate of over 10,000 employees within the village at the close of third quarter 2019 per Jobs EQ. That's the big report from Choose DuPage that's kind of at the back of this. That's like a 18 or 19 page report detailing the economy. The census on the map application, I'd have to go about 20 or so slides ahead, but that's the one with the concentric circles that shows how many people come into the village on any given day from outside. People like myself who don't live in Bartlett but work for the village, and that number was in about 7,400. There were about 1,000 people who both live and work within the village, and then close to 22,000 people within the village, like I know some of you do, who live in the village but work elsewhere during the day. So Bartlett's always had kind of a large net loss of population during the day, but I am pleased to report that number, the 5 years I've done this report, it's improved every single year. Every time at these meetings that we tell you we're working with another company in Brewster Creek Business Park, or McKesson's coming to the village, or somebody like Rana's building another building, or whoever it may be, you know, those are jobs added to the village, and it puts a little dent in that number. So real quickly, 4 years ago, I said 17,005. 3 years ago, I said it was 17,000. Last year, I said it was 15,800, and this year, it's 14,500. So I can't say that that trend will go forever. The business parks are getting close to being built out. Brewster Creek is literally just a few years away from being completely built out. So Blue Heron isn't, but there's not as much land there, not as much opportunity to attract more employees over there. Ethnicity has remained about the same. It's about 78% white, 14.4% Asian, 8.6% Hispanic. I do point out for this report, looking back at the first time I ordered demographic reports in 2006, the Asian population was 10.5. We all know it's been growing, and you can see that from some of the business mix in there and how well the Jane Society and BAPS have attracted more residents and business owners to the village. So that's something I wanted to mention. Population continued aging a little bit. I've been saying that for 5 straight years too. S3, all the demographics firms have it at 39.2. It was 38.8 last year. Housing in Bartlett, we've talked about how we're trying to attract some rental apartment buildings to the town. Bartlett is mostly owner-occupied housing at about 84%, and a very high portion, 71% of the housing stock is single-family detached homes. And another 17% they classify as single-family attached, i.e. townhomes. So that's nearly 90% of the housing stock is comprised of single-family homes and townhomes. Another metric to mention here is that the population 25 years and older, about 44% holds a bachelor's degree or higher, 32% with a bachelor's and 12% graduate or professional. This is a key metric that as we continue trying to attract grocers to the town, the higher end grocers look at this metric. I say this every year too, right or wrong, it's one of the metrics that they look at in terms of the customers that they're targeting. Very happy to say the unemployment rate, as long as I've been tracking it in Bartlett's never been this low, 2.5%, so we should enjoy this also. Business summary, we're still at a fairly similar amount of businesses as last year. It's grown by a little bit. There's been some businesses open that I mentioned earlier. There's a new shopping center that on Army Trail Road that has a couple new businesses, Beef Shack and 220 Fitness. Orange Theory Fitness opened, and over just a block south of here, Cherry on Top Ice Cream Shop, Armanetti's, the taco place coming soon. 120 Live, who you all saw here recently, is getting closer and closer to opening. They'll be before the board for final vote on their BETA grant Tuesday night. And other new businesses coming. Shops of Banbury Fair is going to be doing some rebranding and coming up with some new concepts soon, hopefully. So there'll be some new businesses coming to the village. I mentioned Mr. Rafidia. Again, he's kind of like a one-man gang in terms of increasing the occupancy rate of Streets of Bartlett, which was called Bartlett Plaza up until this past June. I mentioned the great retail occupancy from 8% down to 6.6%. Sales tax revenue is one of those things that remained flat. Really almost exactly the same, maybe 1% or so down from last year. The village collected a larger amount of sales tax, however, because the village imposed home rule sales tax in fall of 2018. So buried in that other 70 pages of documents is the sales tax reports from the village that shows it's pretty steady at this point. One of the things about the BETA program and our marketing in general is that we target sales tax producing businesses more than office. So we're always hoping to grow that number. The sales tax, also something I found interesting, I've looked at the sales tax reports for years, and the DuPage County portion of the village generates about 3 times the amount of sales tax that the Cook County portion does. And the Cook County portion's the largest sales tax category is eating and drinking places, as you would figure. The downtown and Lake Street, most of the places where people would spend money are the bars, the restaurants, a couple of the stores. So that's the biggest sales tax category. As we all know, the Home Depot and the Jewel are both in DuPage County, and those are the two. And besides that, the 2 CVS stores in town and the Walgreens are the largest sales tax generators. So there's, of course, the one CVS pharmacy right down the block here. That's the largest sales tax generator of the downtown. And the rest of it's mostly the eating and drinking places. Industrial occupancy, I have to talk about it. It's only 3%, so please mark this night. There's going to be other spec buildings that are underway. You can see the pictures of them. I recall it was either last year or 2 years ago, I said the vacancy rate for industrial was about 18%. I said, don't worry about it. These are spec buildings. They're by definition going to be vacant when they're built, and then we're going to work to fill them. And I'm going to say that again. Right now, we're at 3%, but we have 3 spec buildings that will be finished this year. I'm assuming you've all seen the 2 buildings at Stearns and Munger that are each 207,000 square feet. So that's going to be 414,000 square feet of vacant inventory. One user so far has looked at 1 building, and that one user only wanted approximately 1/3 of the building. And I don't think we'll be coming in to take it. I know the developers ideally want 1 user for each building, possibly 2. They don't mind dividing it in half, but they don't want to start carving it up like a shopping center. So we're going to have about 500,000 square feet of vacant industrial inventory hit the rolls probably in the next few months. The other 120,000 square feet, I don't have it even pictured here, but it's the former Main Steel building on Devon. You can see the buyer that's been working on it for a year and a half, trying to get that ready for occupancy. So this is probably the lowest vacancy rate you'll see in industrial. I don't know if anybody ever hits 100%, maybe if they have 3 or 4 buildings, but having 38, 48 buildings, that's not really feasible to be at 100% occupancy. I have to mention office occupancy, even though we don't have a lot of office inventory in the village, about 278,000 square feet. The office vacancy rate is 8% as it stands, 16,000 square feet. The building that I have pictured there, that Woodland Hills Professional Center, some of those vacant spaces have been vacant since it's built. I was at the groundbreaking for that probably 12, 13, 14 years ago. It was built by Suburban Orthopedics for their own use, and as a lot of businesses do, they built extra units to sell off, and there's still some vacant there to this day. So that's some of the vacancy. But the vacancy rate for the whole 5 years of this report has never been like lower than 7%, and it's never been higher than 10%, and it probably won't really fluctuate much. It's good and bad. I'll say the bad part is we don't have the big office users in Bartlett that some of the other businesses want. When I talk about daytime population, we don't have that all-state type of business or Grubhub or whatever, Uber, somebody who's going to have 1,500, 2,500 employees, whatever. But the good part of that, too, is that we're not dependent, we're not like one of these towns where maybe Sears or Motorola leaves like 1 million square feet of vacant space. So our office inventory is very steady. We would like to add more office, by the way. When we get to the marketing plan for the next 5 years, I've been thinking about it a little bit. We do want to land some of the bigger office users if we can. That would be a big boost to the town. So the summary, I'm going to hit this too because I didn't write it in my summary. Bartlett's always rated one of the safest communities in the country. That's something, our police take great pride in, the whole village takes great pride in this, and it is something that comes up not in every business meeting, as you would imagine, but every so often it does. People want to feel that if they have 2 or 3 shifts in the business park, they want to have the feeling that their employees would be safe if they show up for work at midnight or if they're leaving at 3 in the morning. And I've been asked before to provide safety statistics for the village, and that's like a slam dunk for us. We always say we're one of the safest communities statistically. This just happens, who is this, Neighborhood Scout? But there's all kinds of independent websites, and if you look in all of them, in the safest communities in the country, you're going to find Bartlett pretty high up on the list.
How do they rate, is it like violent crime, like weapons?
Yeah, they call it, I'm laughing, I was a probation officer for my first almost 9 years out of
Oh,
college.
wow.
And they would call that for a part 1 crime, which is like an assaultive offense.
Okay.
Murder, sexual assault, armed robbery, something of that nature.
Okay.
So that's typically the way they measure it. There's all kinds of measurements. There is property crime in Bartlett, but that's usually what they look at when they say chance of being a victim. Mm-hmm. I could look more into it. I think they're taking all the, crime reports of a certain nature and kind of lumping them all together and then dividing it by the amount of residents. So, Naperville is the top on this list in terms of Illinois, but, you can see that Bartlett's always near the top. I think last year it was top 10. It's always going to be kind of in that range. But I think that's how they measure it.
Okay, thanks.
I had mentioned the unemployment rate. Like I said, I'm not going to go through all this, but this is the unemployment rate. I had mentioned 2.5%. And then all these reports, I'm just going really fast. These are the CoStar reports where I take these measurements from in terms of the number of buildings and the number of vacant space. Each one of these reports is like 40 or 50 pages, so I just took the most salient pages out of that for you so you could see kind of crunch the numbers on it. And, I've been talking about it for a half hour now. So if you have any questions on it, on any particular metric, I'll do my best to answer, or at least get you the answer at a later date. So, any questions, thoughts, concerns on this?
Very thorough.
It is thorough.
Well, it seems we're in a period of dynamic economic activity, and I think it's spread not only in Bartlett, but probably through most of the state and country. I think the economic tools that the president put into place helped everyone, and personally, I'm glad that we have a president who knows a little bit about economics.
Well, I'm going to reply to that saying that a lot of the factors, whether they're national or state, regional, county, they've kind of all come together. I mentioned kind of earlier on, economics goes in cycles. Real estate in particular goes in cycles. among staff when we're meeting in the administration department and the other departments, we talk about trying to capitalize on all of this as long as we can in terms of attracting more development. And I'm not going to attribute it just to national policies or state policies. I can tell you there's lots of challenges in terms of being in 3 different counties where we have 3 different tax rates depending on what side of the line your building lies. But in a nutshell, I'm going to say we're happy with this. And the best thing you can do as either a country, a state, a county, a city, is to position yourself the best you can while the times are going good. When it comes to our industrial parks, I talk a lot about diversifying the economy. We don't want to become too dependent upon any one business or any one industry. So, with that, I can say I enjoy reporting these very low vacancy rates to you, but, don't have an illusion that that will necessarily last forever, and hope that there isn't another big hit to the real estate market right around the corner. A lot of people think maybe that there is. But the Chicago, and one more thing about that, the Chicago industrial market, the Chicago area market is very strong. It's had the 2 or 3 strongest years. Our vacancy rate is extraordinarily low, but the whole Chicago market as a whole for industrial real estate, if you went to Bensonville, Itasca, Elk Grove, Wooddale, they're all doing well. The towns that are struggling more with that are in Cook County. Our business park is in DuPage County. It was planned that way. So anyway, I could talk at length about that, but we're riding the wave of industrial development right now. We're right on top of it.
That's like,
And doing a good job.
Thank you.
that's what I just wanted to say too, like you guys seem to be doing a very good job with positioning our community well, so when opportunities do arise, we have this data, we have the image that we can project to potential people coming in, and I think that's super important as you talk about like the different waves of the economy.
We do. A lot of businesses have different questions. Some are more concerned with the age of residents, some are with the income, some are with educational level. We try to have it all here, so when some random, we're trying to get ready, like an athlete trying to get ready for anything that comes to them in a game, where if somebody asks us for some metric, we don't have to go, we will dig out a metric if we need to, or order it, but we like to have it on hand so we can provide it immediately. I can tell you the 2 businesses we're meeting with this week, they both look at similar metrics, but not the same ones. They have different interests in terms of the age and income levels. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that is something a lot of people look at.
I have a question. So everything seems real positive, but do you have a theory behind the sales tax where it says that it's been, that it's flat after increasing for many years? So if this is kind of the perfect storm where everything is going well, why then would we see a flat or decline in the sales tax? Do you have a theory behind that?
Especially if I was going to ask the same question, especially if the daytime loss is actually trending in the right direction over the last 5 years.
Right.
Why,
Why the shift?
are we bringing people in that just aren't spending any money in Bartlett? Or what's the theory behind that or concern?
No, I'm not sure I've developed a specific theory besides that, I look at it as a positive as well, that it didn't really decline by a whole lot. We added a few sales tax producing businesses over the year, but not some of the big fish, so to speak. I mean, the number had gone from the first time the village made over 200 million in sales was only maybe like 7, 8, 9 years ago. So it made it up to about 240 last year. It had gone up for, I think, 6 straight years before this year, where it just leveled off. And I think it's just simply, we didn't really add any big sales tax producers. There were some restaurants that came in, but not the kind of restaurant, the restaurants that might have been doing 1 million in sales for a year or less, not something that was doing 2 or 3 or 4 million. So I think I would characterize that as just more static in terms of we didn't really add many, no large sales tax producers, but several kind of smaller ones. So I think that the eating and drinking money, the grocery shopping money, the buying things at Banbury Fair and the bike shop, I think it just simply remained static with the same amount of residents for the year. We always like talking about businesses that we think will draw people into town. For instance, more brewing. We're confident that more, when they build, it's not just going to necessarily take eating and drinking dollars from O'Hare's and the Still and Pasta Mia. It might take some customers from the local businesses who might otherwise go to it, but we're looking to draw people from 10, 15, 20-mile radius to come here and spend money. And so I think maybe once they're humming along, you might see a slight uptick in the sales tax category, but that's basically my thoughts on it, is that it was just very static. No big growth and no big decline. Same people shopping at the same places as 2018.
And you have to remember, we have so many people in this community who work outside of this community. There's only 1,000 people who live in Bartlett, who work in Bartlett. Very small number come in. Most of our people leave the village to go shopping, or to go to work, so that's when they're picking up their gas, picking up their lunch, their groceries, their prescriptions on their way back into the village. So a lot of it is that people aren't necessarily thinking about spending their money in Bartlett first. It's really on their way in, from wherever they had lunch, wherever their office is.
Yeah, and there's one more thing. I almost forgot that's a great point, Commissioner Erickson. There's one more point that I forgot that's probably the biggest one, is our finance director, Todd Dowden, reports when he does the budget on the Amazon tax. And the amount that I'm talking about are sales tax revenues collected from businesses where the point of sale is in Bartlett. So if we see Amazon sell 1 year $70 million worth of goods, and then the next year it's $80 million, that's an extra $10 million spent by Bartlett residents, but not at point of sale in Bartlett, is what I'm saying. So the Amazon, I didn't put, maybe I'll add that to the next report. The village collects Amazon tax. I'm sure it has a more technical name, but everybody refers to it as the Amazon tax, where Illinois began requiring sales tax collection. There's certain parameters you probably know about, where if somebody has a physical location within the state, they have to collect sales tax. My family and I are big Amazon shoppers, and I can tell you from experience, been paying a lot of sales tax on it the last year. So that might be another thing. We're trying to combat, in November, when we sit here and we talk about the Small Business Saturday, we're trying to encourage people on an ongoing basis to shop locally. But truthfully, there's nowhere to buy a TV here in town. There's nowhere to buy a car. If you're buying some of those big ticket items, if you're buying a whole new wardrobe, you're going to buy it online or out of town. So, I think maybe the sales tax, I think it'll continue to grow as we continue adding new businesses. Even with the new shopping center, this doesn't include sales tax from Beef Shack. There's going to be another gaming cafe, if you will, in that center. So you're going to see a little uptick in sales tax, but it's not going to be by millions and millions of dollars. It'll probably be by a couple million at a time.
You mentioned a major sales tax producer on a dealership. Is the village pursuing getting a dealership in the village, or are we not available to have the land available?
That's becoming more challenging. The answer to that is we pursued some dealerships pretty hard in 2019. they elected not to come to the village. We had been offering them some or all of the village-owned land at the southwest corner of Route 59 and Lake Street. That is an 11-acre parcel, but as I mentioned earlier, we've been working with a potential apartment developer on that site for, I don't even know how long, Scott, my whole life. 2 years. We've been working for a few years with him, and we're hoping it comes in soon. So that 11-acre site might soon become a 4-acre site, which is, we still pitch it to smaller dealerships, but not the big ones you see on TV with the commercials, kind of some of the smaller ones. I'll be honest, they've passed on it. There's a number of reasons, but they've passed on it. So we would love to have a auto dealership, for sure.
Is it something due to the locations that we have, or is it something to do with the village, period?
Well, I mean, the location technically is in the village. It's not something wrong with the village. The only thing I would say is that there's no auto row. If an auto dealer likes to drive down a place like Irving Park Road or Gulf Road and see Mazda, then Toyota, then Buick, then GMC, then Cadillac, then Tesla,
They like,
rather than being, I'm 10 miles away from everybody on my own over here. We started going after them because of the Toyota dealership, Bob Loquercio. Yeah, and I'm not going to say that's the only car dealer that we went after, but he's one that we definitely went after pretty hard.
Is that the one across from Villa?
Yeah, it's Elgin
So that's
Toyota.
Dreamwood or Elgin?
It's in Streamwood.
yeah, and now the Chrysler dealer's going to be there too, so Chrysler Jeep is moving right next to them.
Is there a way that we can attract somebody on the other side of the street?
I mean, that's,
They're 2 blocks from my house.
yeah. Well, the other side of the street, meaning near, just east of,
Well, I mean, even on 59 there, that's the other side of the street, just meaning Bartlett, right?
right, those are some of the sites we've been pitching them.
Got it.
Yeah. There's a lot of hair on those sites at 59 and Lake also. Those are very difficult to develop. We're hoping, I keep talking about the apartment project we're working on. We hope that that jumpstarts some development in the area. We're confident that it would make the 4 acres of frontage look more attractive. But I can tell you, it is in Cook County, which is a challenge for commercial, but not necessarily for the residential component. But, yeah, it's been a challenging site, for sure. But that's something we've been working on for a long time, trying to bring a new multifamily development to the village. We haven't had an apartment project built here in over 40 years.
So Tony, what's the total sales tax generated? 3.6?
I'm gonna go back, I'm gonna have to consult
it's-
my,
2 slides before that, I think.
yeah, let me go up. It was like 240-ish million, like maybe 236, 237. I'd still be writing if I put every detail in, but, yeah, 238.4 million in taxable sales from July 2018 through June 2019. That was literally like maybe 1 point something million different than last year. It was like 239. It's about the same.
So what does that convert to sales-wise in the town?
Well, 1%, the village, I do have that. I'm not sure if I can quickly,
I'm just trying to get an idea what
oh, here it is.
what the businesses generate.
Yeah, hold on. I can get to that. It's only like a few slides up. Here it is. View. Well, that's not easy to see, is it? Page up. Okay. For the 12-month period of time, the way I came up with the 238 million in sales is because that was on the straight 1%. That before the village imposed a sales tax, or a home rule sales tax, automatically in Illinois, every community would get a straight 1%. So the village collected 2,383,743. So the number, when I present that it's 238 million, that's just multiplying that number by 100. There's a lot of asterisks next to that too, but, I'm just comparing apples to apples. A lot of food items, as you know, are taxed differently, like consumable food like milk and produce isn't taxed as high as, say, if you buy a pair of gloves. But that's basically the way we back into that number.
So if we add those two numbers together, it's like 3.6 million?
Right, and the
that's-
1.2, remember, is a new home rule sales tax. That didn't exist last year.
Okay.
While the village board, Scott's working on the budget process here like every day now. The board, we have a May 1 budget year, and, a year or two ago, when the board was looking to shore up a shortfall is when the home rule sales tax was created. Most of the communities around here have it.
So if I'm doing the math correctly, which I'm not really good at math except commissions, so are we saying that in the village, we sold $360 million worth of
No.
goods?
No,
Times 1% would give us 3.6?
no, I should clarify that. It's two different taxes.
Okay,
When I highlight the two different taxes, the larger number there, the 2,383,000, that's the straight 1% that the village collected. When you see that 1.2 million, that is how much the village collected in the new home rule sales tax that was imposed. What you'll see there next year is those two numbers will probably be exactly the same. The reason they don't match up for that period of time is the village collected zero home rule sales tax until mid-October of 2018. So there were 3.5 months in this time period when the village collected zero for home rule sales tax. So for the math purposes, I didn't want to confuse anybody. The 2.383 is the straight 1% that the village collects. If you go to Banbury Fair and spend $100, the village gets $1. When you pay your 9% tax, most of it goes to the state and the county, and then the village gets the 1%.
What is the home rule tax?
Well, Bartlett's a home rule community, meaning we're not governed. That's kind of a thing I would kind of have Scott maybe explain, but because of the size of the population, Bartlett's able to create its own ordinances and not just abide by the county ordinances. So a home rule unit of government like the village is allowed to impose its own sales tax, and that's what they elected to do. So the sales tax in the village of Bartlett raised for everything that you buy, had an extra sales tax imposed on it about a little over a year ago.
Does Bartlett have an exit tax if you move out of the village?
Yes, there's property transfer taxes. Yes.
But if you
It's not included in
move
this?
inside of the village, they don't
You get
tax
it
you.
back, right,
You don't pay no tax
right,
if you move inside of the village.
right,
If you move and stay in Bartlett, you don't have to pay that.
right. And then if you move out of Illinois, you get dinged twice.
But your taxes go down because wherever you're moving.
so we sold in the village, cost of goods sold would be 238 million.
Right, I should
Of that
specify
Well, I'm trying to get an idea of what,
taxable items.
right, so every time you spend something at Home Depot or the grocery store, it all added up to 238 million.
Right,
1% of that is this 2.38 number.
correct.
All right, very good.
Right.
Yep, that's what I
I
needed.
should mention too that the the existing RV dealership had a good year also. I speak with them a little bit. They always told me, I don't speak with them constantly, but maybe once a year or so. they always say they're one of those economic bellwether type of businesses. I mean, during the recession, nobody was spending $200,000 on an RV, but the RV sales have ticked up also. So I didn't want to forget them. They're one of our also one of our larger sales tax generators. So yeah, all the RVs, things bought at Home Depot, any store, any eating and drinking, that adds up to the 238 million.
That's a lot of pennies.
It is, we'd like it to be more.
Is there any pushback on the home rule from new companies coming in?
There was a little bit, but I'm not going to say it was real strong. It was just some of them that struggled a little bit with their billing software. I did have 2 or 3 people tell me, I won't say exactly who, but a few people who didn't find out about it right away and then found about it later when they got some kind of letter about it, and other people who had challenges with their point of sale system. I mean, I'm not a computer guy per se, but there were people who had trouble like adjusting their point of sale system.
It doesn't
What about
hurt,
recruiting?
it doesn't hurt the village's recruitment at all, I would say, to be fair, because literally every community around us has it, and they actually have it for more. A lot of them are 1.5 and 2% home rule sales tax, and some of the communities around us even have a food and beverage tax, and on top of that, some other communities have a special downtown assessment tax. So as far as recruitment of businesses, no, it doesn't hurt us at all.
Oh, right. If you mean it in terms of recruitment, no, it's not an issue.
Okay.
Sorry if I didn't hit every point on this, but there was a lot of information.
And so there's 482 businesses that are generating those taxes. If you look at the next 2 pages, or
Right.
those pages right there, you just add up the Cook County, the DuPage.
Right. This is something I find, this is one of those reports that's short, but I find fascinating. I've looked at it year after year, but this is the first time it dawned on me that 3 times as many sales tax dollars are generated in DuPage County than Cook, which makes perfect sense. And then you see, it's kind of hard to see, but out of and this is a quarterly report, by the way. This isn't the annual report, so I just kind of extrapolate from that. But you can see that out of the 655,000 sales tax generated to the state in that quarter in Cook County, and 212,000 of it was from drinking and eating places. So you see others like automotive type places. They shouldn't put the word agriculture, but it says agriculture and all others. So that's everything else, basically, because there's not really any agriculture here in Cook County, Bartlett. And then that big number you see for drugs and miscellaneous retail, just read that as CVS Pharmacy. Probably out of the 100, how much was that? Yeah, 52, bear with me. Yeah, 52,000, 5.2 million sold in a quarter. That's probably all from the CVS.
Well, if you take the 238 million and divide it by the 482 businesses, it comes out to just under 500,000 per business in tax revenue. Now, obviously, the Dogfather's not generating what CVS is generating.
No.
But just to give you an idea, it's just interesting. The numbers are interesting.
That is an interesting metric. I can tell you sometimes when I look at the list of all the sales tax generators, it's a little bit out there. It includes some home-based businesses too that only do a couple $1,000s a year in sales. I mean, it's like any large list of numbers, it's skewed all the way from people who sold a few $100s worth of things over the year all the way to the CVS doing, 20 million in sales. But yeah, that's an interesting point. Any other questions or comments on this?
right, seeing nothing else, we can move on to new business.
I don't really have anything new to add to this or to add to an upcoming agenda. I can tell you in terms of new business, we'll be showing you some of the digital website-related apps that we've been working on at the next meeting. Still working on getting some more people to submit beta grants. If you had asked me a few weeks ago, I would have told you I would think there would be 2 beta grants coming to you in February and March, but now I don't think that there are. A couple of the projects fell through. We are working with some existing businesses, however, that are looking to expand and modify their concepts a little bit. So as I mentioned, our fiscal year ends May 1. I sincerely hope to have another beta grant before that time, but can tell you there's nobody right now, close to submitting one.
And where do we stand with the beta grant? How much is left?
Half.
Okay.
Half, yeah. We recommended, the EDC and staff recommended 50,000 for 120 Live. The village board reviewed that at their last committee of the whole meeting. They all seemed pretty good with it and forwarded it to the next board meeting next Tuesday. Seems like they're going to approve the 50,000 since they're spending close to 400,000 on their project.
And I just have a question based on, I was getting questions online, just any kind of update on Moore Brewing.
Yes, we've been, not myself, but we've been in contact with them as recently as this week. I know Scott kind of keeps on top of this project, something he's worked really hard to help bring into the town. It's our understanding that they're close to completing their Huntley project. They've put us on ice, so to speak, until Huntley is completed. Scott, do you have anything to add?
Sums it
on
up,
that?
once Huntley's open, is when it's probably time for us to get excited. And they should be opening within a month or so.
Okay, great. Is there still something in place in the contract about when they need to do groundbreaking before the option for the village to take it back?
There is. I can't rattle the dates off the top of my head, but they extended. They came to the board within the last couple of months and extended their contract and their period for due diligence and everything like that. I know they've told us they want to close on the property sometime late spring to early summer, May, June.
Okay.
So we're still pushing them a lot. One of our biggest projects we have going, so we definitely want to keep on top of that.
Perfect, thank you.
Welcome.
Is Bartlett Tap still open?
As far as we know, it is still open at this time. I couldn't vouch for it being open exactly when they're supposed to every time, but
It doesn't even look like there's a business there.
Well, if you follow social media, he posted something, he was on vacation for a week or two over the holidays, and then he posted his hours just recently. It's like 4 to 7, closed on Sunday, Monday. And that was a post that Bartlett Tap posted on Facebook.
Yeah, it didn't go for New Year's Eve money. It was interesting.
He caught some flack on social media for it, but,
Honestly,
Yeah, a lot of these posts.
a lot of the businesses in town weren't open on New Year's Eve.
well, I know O'Hare's had an Irish countdown, so
And then they closed
they
early.
counted it down at 6, and then they were closed at 9.
We have a meeting with the owner, not scheduled, but requested, and we'll be chatting with him.
Great. Anything else? Well, can I get a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll second the motion.
Great, motion carried. The meeting is adjourned right at 8 o'clock.
great, thank you. An hour exactly.
Yeah, that one's there. I think some.